Hello and welcome to the USA Volleyball Show, the official podcast of USA Volleyball. My name is Steven Munson, and I'm joined again by Severin Lavenstein. Severin, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic, Steven. How are you doing?
Doing great. Just had a great weekend, covering VNL. Men's VNL is going on right now, so I enjoyed watching those matches. Kind of split with, U.S. men's wins and losses, but always great to see our top team out there, especially, our Olympic roster that's going to represent USA in Paris too. So fun seeing them compete and get used to playing with each other again. Definitely a process, as cliche as that sounds, but trust the process, and they're going to get there, and it's going to be fun watching them in Paris and also continuing in VNL too.
Yeah, I think with that roster, it's pretty easy to trust the process with all that experience and talent.
That's
so,
right.
They'll put it together. Watching VNL this weekend, you had a lot of options there because you could also watch the beach as well, and some great results over there in Elite 16 Ostrava as well. So, it's kind of bouncing back and forth between what was going to be on Volleyball World.
Yeah, exciting time in volleyball. A lot going on too. Speaking of outside of volleyball, really quick, you're a Boston sports fan, right?
I'm a big Boston sports fan.
I'm a Celtics fan.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. And I know that you're a Mavericks fan, so I feel like it's odd that you chose to bring me back for the intro today. I figured now that you're down 0-2 at this point, I believe when this is coming out, we'll already know the results of Game 3. But I'm surprised you're able to talk to me this morning.
Yeah, I almost made a last-minute call to keep you off this podcast, but I can respect Boston. They are a strong team, very strong defensive team too. Great shooters all around. And Dallas is just struggling with finding that third man to help us outside of Luka and Kyrie. But it's going to be a tough series. Hopefully we can bounce back in Dallas when we return there for Game 3 and 4. But it's going to be tough. But it is a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun seeing, for me personally, just seeing Dallas in the finals. It's been a while. 2011 was the last time we were there.
A lesser man would have been able to make a joke about, me not showing up to the intro there, just kind of like the rest of the roster besides Luka and Kyrie. I wouldn't make that joke, not at all. But a lesser man would for sure. No, it's kind of cool watching, the Celtics finally kind of be back in the finals after last year, which was a disappointment. And also it's really neat just kind of being in LA with a lot of transplants. You can kind of go find, a place where there's a lot of other Boston fans, and you forget, at least for me for a second, that you're on the complete other side of the country, which is fun. And, a bunch of my buddies texting back and forth in the group chat, from when we saw the teams back in high school, and that was the last game I've been to. So it's nice out here to feel like you're a little bit closer to home than you actually are.
You're going to try to make it back to Boston for a finals game?
I don't know if I can afford a finals game, so probably not. I think the TV is for me.
That's what I was going to say as well, yeah. My wife jokingly said, sorry I didn't get you Mavs tickets for your birthday. It's like, we can't afford that. It's not in our budget.
You'd have to take out another mortgage for that one, I'm guessing.
That's right, yeah. Well, exciting time in sports all around. But just going back to volleyball now, there's a lot going on. We got BNL, as you mentioned, all the beach tournaments going on too, and a couple big announcements that we'll get to and the news coming up here. But before we do, wanted to let you guys know, if you haven't already listened to or watched our last episode, we spoke to U.S. Beach national team athlete Theo Brunner. We chat with him. He tells us about his introduction to volleyball, both, his career on the indoor side and beach, talks about past beach partnerships. And we also learn a little bit more about his life off the court too, including tap dance, video games, and fatherhood. If you are wondering about those three things, you're going to have to go listen to that episode because he dives into it and it's a lot of fun. But all that and more in episode 93, available on all podcast platforms. And you can check out video episodes on the USA Volleyball website and YouTube. Now, I'm workshopping something here, so bear with me. On the scene with Lavenstein. There we go.
I kind of like it. Replacing News with Hughes is tough, but we will soldier on as best we can and try to get through these as smoothly as Clarence would. So here we go. But the U.S. women's Olympic volleyball team is set. Congratulations to the 12 players who will represent the USA in Paris this summer. A fantastic roster. It includes several former pod guests as well. So you can check that out at usavolleyball.org. I could tell you, but you got to go to the website and see all the cool graphics and everything that we've put together. Go look at it for yourself. And now we can also say we have officially the U.S. Olympic beach team's announcement as well. I'll tell you those ones. It's Kelly Chang and Sarah Hughes, Taryn Cloth and Kristen Nuss representing the U.S. women. And for the men, Miles Partain and Andy Benish and Chase Budinger and Miles Evans. It's a fantastic group there for the beach finalized. Congratulations to all of those pairs as well. More info, once again, you can go to our website, usavolleyball.org, and check out our graphics from our amazing graphics team as well. I'm super excited to see these teams in Paris. And it should be great. And also, more congratulations, because just because we announced the rosters doesn't mean the winning stops there. We have the U.S. Beach National Team pair, Kelly Chang and Sarah Hughes, winning gold at the Beach Pro Tour Elite 16 Ostrava this past weekend. And also, congrats to Miles and Andy for taking home bronze in the Czech Republic as well. So it's almost like they knew they were going to get announced, and then immediately, remind them, hey, we win medals too, and this is what you can expect us to try to go for in Paris. So the U.S. pairs also walked away with 3 medals at the Beach Pro Tour in Futures Sveti Vlas. On the women's side, Carly Kahn and Madeline Anderson won gold, and then Kennedy Coakley and Brooke Sweat won bronze. Great to see them take home some medals. And for the men, Logan Weber and Hagen Smith took bronze. That's their second straight Futures medal. Great to watch those pairs do so well and have some great results as well. And we're going to stay on the beach. 16 women, 15 men selected for the 2024 USA Volleyball Beach Collegiate National Team. Athletes are training June 11th through 19th at Hermosa Beach, California. That's out here. And the athletes then compete in the NORCECA trials June 18th to 19th. The winners will earn a bid to represent the USA at upcoming NORCECA events. Steven, I'm going to be out there for a little bit. It's going to be really fun to see some of those teams, some of those athletes competing out there on the beach. Hopefully we won't get some rain this week, because that would kind of dampen the mood a little bit.
Yeah, hopefully not. Is Brothers Burritos still out there?
There's 2 locations, Hermosa, Manhattan. You don't have to go too far to each one.
Oh, that's my favorite part about Hermosa Beach. So
I'm jealous for worth the hype. Definitely worth a free plug there as well. But if they want to sponsor us, please, I will take some free food. We've also got 12 athletes that have been selected to compete at the NORCECA Men's U21 Continental Championship. That's June 11th through 16th in Mexico. And the U.S. men's national team, as Steven mentioned, finished week 2 of Volleyball Nations League play with a 3-5 record. They'll travel to Manila, Philippines to begin week 3 on June 19th. And that means now, with that past week ending, it's the U.S. women's national team competing in Japan for week 3 of Volleyball Nations League coming up this week. And all those matches are on Volleyball World, and that's volleyballvb.tv. And you can find that obviously on their socials and by going to the Volleyball World website and watching along there. You can follow along with the action even when you're not watching Volleyball World on USA Volleyball social media. And for all the latest news, you know what to do. Visit usavolleyball.org. Steven, I think you're muted there, but we can read your lips and kind of figure out you're going to tell us more exciting.
I have two mute buttons, so it's hard to keep track. Yeah, great job with the news there. Exciting time in volleyball indeed. And we talk about all that with today's guest, sports broadcaster Emily Ehman. She is all over the volleyball scene, Big Ten Network, ESPN, Fox Sports, to name a few, and currently calling matches for Volleyball World at Volleyball Nations League. She gives her thoughts on the U.S. women's Olympic roster and highlights what's been happening at BNL. She dives into her background a little bit, including why she got it, or why she wanted to go into broadcasting. And she also gives some great advice to the next generation of women who want a career in sports. But that is enough from us. Let's get right into it. Here's Emily. Let's jump right in. Emily, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us. We talked about it at the top here when we were kind of introducing ourselves, but we've been trying to get you on. We've been talking about getting you on the podcast for a while now, and works out great. You're getting ready to head out to Hong Kong soon, so glad we got you before then. But busy time, exciting time in volleyball right now. And, for a lot of different reasons, but specifically right now in your world, you are traveling with the BNL. So could you talk a little bit about that? Have you been to every week for the women now?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me. I'm so glad we were able to make this work. And like you said, perfect timing. I mean, we're kind of in the thick of VNL and, some teams still trying to qualify, other teams trying to shore up their roster and get some connection and comfortability playing next to each other. So I'm pumped to be here at this time. Yes, I mean, VNL has been the most exciting thing. It's one of my most fun jobs that I have among the many that I do. But yeah, I'm headed out to Hong Kong. It's the Friday before week 3. So head out to Hong Kong tonight. I got a 15-hour flight trying to figure out what these TV shows that I'm going to download. So I got some good recs, but I mean, it's been an absolute blast. Normally what happens is me and my partner, Anne-Marie Anderson, she's a play-by-play, we'll follow Team USA around and call most of their matches. But the way this week worked was there's the men's week after the women's in Japan. So they wanted the same crew there, which overlapped with the women's finals in Thailand. So hopefully we'll see Team USA out in Bangkok after. But I mean, it has been an absolute blast, getting to travel from country to country, cities that I maybe would have never seen before, calling the highest level of volleyball and getting paid to do it all. It's absolutely insane.
I'm sure we'll dive into that a little bit more too when we talk about, your career as a broadcaster and favorite things about it. But I mean, you mentioned some shows that you're downloading for the flight. Anything specifically that you want to bring up here?
Oh, good.
Curious.
Good question. I'm sorting through it all right now. I think I would say I'm more of a movie person than TV show on a plane. This is random, but I've always wanted to watch all the Rocky movies, so I'm trying to get those all downloaded. I've seen all the Creed ones, which I know is probably bad that I haven't seen all the Rocky movies, but going back and I'm going to try to rip through a bunch of those on the way there and back.
I haven't seen the newer installments of those, like the Creed movies as well, but that's the 15-hour flight. That's a perfect time, perfect excuse to just sit in your seat and watch those marathon.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm pumped.
I haven't seen any of the Rocky or Creed movies, so you both have me beat.
Oh, come on. I've seen the Creed ones, and those are, oh my gosh, they are.
See the Rocky classics too.
I know. Now I know what to watch on the plane next time I'm going. So. Emily, how is this year's VNL kind of compared to maybe some that you've called in the past, both either for you personally or just from what you've observed?
Yeah, I keep thinking back to last year, because last year was my first year doing VNL, and it's much different. I think mostly just in terms of kind of knowing what I'm doing. Last year I was at 5 different stops. I did all the women's prelims and the finals, and I also snuck a week of men's in there when they were out in Anaheim. And it's a lot different because I think I have a better understanding of what VNL is and what it looks like from a production standpoint, a scheduling standpoint, and all the above. So I kind of know what I'm getting into in terms of prep and, how much I need to sleep and what realistically I can handle. Last year, I will say, I think I overdid it a little bit. Adding that men's weekend was definitely really tough from a prep standpoint of, trying to get to know all these new teams that I'm only having for a week. Whereas for the women, you're having teams over and over again. The prep kind of decreases as the tournament goes on because the team so much better. This year, I feel like I'm in such a better position with so many of these teams, and then just being able to handle the schedule. We're actually calling more games this year than we did last year. We only did 2 a day last year, and this year we're calling every single match every single day, which as a whole sounds pretty intense. And don't get me wrong, it definitely is. So, you're calling 16 matches over a 6-day period, which, is absolutely insane. But for whatever reason, I feel a lot less exhausted than I did last year. And again, part of that is because I know the team's better, but also there's so much on the line for some of these teams. This year's different in that you have 4 teams that are gutting it out trying to qualify for the Olympics. And then, of course, you have teams that are already qualified that are still trying to get that seeding in place to, get a better pool round and pool play for the Olympics. So it's been fun to watch those teams that are already qualified get more comfortable in their rosters, watch those players, play next to each other and gel better. And for a team like USA, trying to figure out who the heck they're going to bring. And then for those other teams, I'm watching Canada and the Netherlands right now. they are neck and neck, and this week 3 is going to be so important for them. So that also gives us as broadcasters a lot more energy. It's, it's more fun to call games when there's stakes on the line. Every time I'm calling a Canada game, I know that every point in every set matters more than it does for some of these other teams.
I definitely want to go back to that prep that you were talking about before, because I'm fascinated by that. But just quickly too, you mentioned VNL Anaheim, and obviously you're coming off VNL Arlington as well. And I would also imagine that you get a lot of energy as a broadcaster from some good crowds. And just what was your experience overall with just the VNL coming to the US and those crowds there for those matches?
Yeah, it's obviously different than it is around the world. Like I remember last year, we go into Antalya, Turkey, and there's 12,000 people every single night for Turkey. And those fans, it's similar to Brazil. Like, they're like Premier League soccer fans. They are absolutely insane. They're making noise the entire time. These players to them are kind of the equivalent to our like NBA players. Like, they're household names. Everyone knows them. And it is insane to go to some of these places like Turkey, like Brazil, and see the crowds that they bring. I think last year for the finals, we didn't really know what to expect having it in Arlington in the US. We've seen really big crowds at, some collegiate matches, like of course, Nebraska, we see that at Wisconsin, at Texas, these crazy environments, but you don't know how well that's going to translate to a professional setting. Last year, VNL was absolutely insane. For all the US matches, it was packed to the brim. For the finals for Turkey and China, it was completely packed to the brim. And I think everyone was like, where do all these Turkey and China fans come from? Arlington, Texas. Yep. So many of them traveled out, which was so fun. And even last week being in Arlington, I think there's a new vibe around professional volleyball in the US with the emergence of leagues like PVF and League One starting next year, and just our ability as a country and as sports fans to really embrace women's sports and try to uplift them and push that momentum forward. And we've seen so many fans in the stands for those matches last year and really this last week as well, especially while USA was playing for those big ones, against Turkey and against Poland. Those were pretty insane environments. But it's fun, coming from a background for me, mostly in the collegiate game, to see the growth that we've seen in college kind of translate over to professional as well, which has been really fun, as a broadcaster to see, but just kind of as a volleyball fan and women's sports fan.
I was looking around last week and I was like, yeah, it looks like a Turkey home match for that. Right. And it was just cool to hear too, the energy on the serves as well, instead of it being dead silent. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, it was so fun. And you mentioned that Turkey USA match. It kind of did feel like a Turkey home match, which is fun because again, you have all these Turkey fans coming from, I don't know where, we're in the middle of Texas. One, where did they come from? Two, so pumped that they were there because it made that environment really fun, not only for obviously the US fans watching their team, but like Turkey fans, again, they're absolutely insane. Like, they're going to scream the whole match. They're going to start chants. They all know what they're doing. They're singing all the songs that are in the arena. It was an absolute blast.
Yeah, I remember last year you touched on it, the atmosphere for the finals, and you just never know, especially in the States, and for non-USA matches, what are those crowds going to look like?
Yeah.
But they showed up, they filled every seat in that venue. And I even remember going back to my hotel last year after the match, and the Turkey fans were still talking in the lobby, at the bar, hanging out and just loving it. But love to see that in the US. And like you said, hopefully, we see that continue to translate into the US pro leagues as well, and seeing that support. But you kind of talked about the international game and the crowds there, and were there any other big surprises for you, as a broadcaster as you're traveling to these international events? Of course the crowds are crazy, the fans are crazy, but any other big shocking moments that you saw or witnessed?
That's a good question. I think, it's, I guess, twofold. One, from an actual broadcasting standpoint, calling these matches is very different than calling college games in the US, because most of your production crew is probably not from the US. They probably don't speak English. So the communication there is a little bit different. And it forces me as a broadcaster to kind of get outside my comfort zone in that sense, and also be able to operate with my co-commentator, with my play-by-play, as more of a unit, rather than having constant communication with the producer, with the director, telling them what replay I want to see. I have to become a lot more reactionary to some of those plays that are unfolding. Also from a prep standpoint, in college, we get handed a 40-page media packet that helps us prep for some of these games. In professional ball, we get the rosters one day before matches start, and you kind of have to assume who's coming week to week. And that changes prep a little bit. But it also forces you to dive deeper into some of these players that maybe you would have just been, handed information beforehand. So in one way, I feel like I lack a little bit in prep that I comparative to how I would in college, but also at the same time, I do feel like I know these players better because I'm forced to do more research on them. And then just in terms of atmosphere and all of that, I think the biggest surprise that I guess I didn't anticipate or maybe didn't know about. And I remember it last year for my first week out in Antalya, Turkey, just the way that these athletes are celebrated, and not even just the home athletes. Of course, when you go to Turkey, those athletes are celebrated and praised, and same thing in Brazil. But for all the US games, they have a giant line of people waiting for them after some of these matches, and not even just for the players that maybe played club there. They are world renowned players. And it's been so fun to see. That's one of the reasons why I'm really excited to go to Bangkok, Thailand for the finals, because, their volleyball team historically is not that great. They've never even been to an Olympics, but that country loves volleyball more than anything. And that's, I think, what I'm most excited about, to see a place where maybe their team isn't that good, but they know all the names, they know all the players, they know where they've played club, they know everything about them. They live and breathe volleyball. And to be in that culture comparative to here in the States where, it's men's basketball, it's men's football. So I think it's been exciting to see overseas how big volleyball is. And I think I'm just excited to kind of continue to see how big it is and see how some of these fans react. Because obviously that's, the dream for all us volleyball fans here is to get to a point where these players are household names.
Yeah, I can back you up with how much Thailand loves volleyball, just from our social media comment section. Love from Thailand is one of the big comments we always get. But yeah, we talked to a lot of our national team athletes who play overseas, and they have that same kind of language barrier when they're playing with their teammates. So it was cool to kind of see there's this similar thing with you in the broadcast booth with your co-commentators too.
Yep. Definitely. It's nice because my play-by-plays always speak English, but just as a production crew, my producer might be Italian, my director might be Brazilian. You never really know. So you kind of just hope for the best, and then you and your play-by-play or co-commentator, you figure it out as you go, and you do your job to the best of your ability.
That's cool.
Well, it's nice that volleyball is a little bit of that universal language, and not to give people too much of the inside baseball, but it was kind of cool to see you and your production crew playing a little bit of a scrimmage match before one of those final matches at VNL. So clearly not too much of a barrier, and that looked super fun to be able to kind of do that on the court before the last one got going.
Oh yeah, there's some days where, you're on day 4 or 5 and energy's pretty low, and you kind of hope for a 3-set match earlier in the day. So you have 2.5 hours to kind of just hang out. And normally that's what we'll do. The crew will kind of go down before fans are in the building or between matches and play a little game of pickup. And you're always surprised by some people that are maybe just holding a camera or working graphics that come in and can ball out. And you're like, where did you come from?
You were getting some cheers too, so you had definitely an audience at that point.
Oh yeah, we were my side was definitely the fan favorites, and I will say that. So thank God, that would have ruined my day.
That's awesome. Well, staying with BNL really quick and talking specifically about the U.S. women's national team too. What are you seeing from the broadcast booth? What are the notes you're taking on this roster, week to week that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think the first 2 weeks, Coach Cry was trying to figure out who he wanted to bring. So we saw different, rosters, both week 1 and week 2, trying to, hammer out, okay, this person looks good here. We may have people that weren't able to travel. And in the case of someone not being ready to go for the Olympics, who can we add in? And it was really interesting to see some of the decision-making from Karch to figure out which players he liked in what positions, and, figure out the rotations that he liked. And we saw it kind of hammered out those last 2 games in Arlington of, okay, these are the players that we probably want to bring. Now, how are they going to gel together? it was their first time really playing next to each other. You don't have much time to practice during VNL. You know, you maybe have one day off. USA was lucky to have 2 days off, so they tried to figure out, rotations and all of that. But this team has improved a lot. I would say the start of VNL, this did not look like a team that could medal. And now I think with this roster, they look like they can. And they look like a team that, once they gel well together and they have those rotations down, and players finally being able to actually play next to each other after, a week of practice in Anaheim and headed off to Japan, this team could be a team that could medal in the Olympics. And, I don't think that's surprising because so many of the roster is the same as what we saw from the last Olympics. 8 of those 12 are veterans. And of course you have those 4 newbies, but I mean, the newbies don't look like newbies either. You got a player like Avery Skinner that's absolutely been balling out, averaging well over 10 points a match during VNL play. So I do not envy Karch's, decision-making and try to putting together the roster. It's a blessing that he has such a deep roster that decision to have those 12 plus 1 is so tough to make. But I think this team is improving a lot. And I'm really interested to see week 3 during Japan, how this team plays with a pretty much set, positions and starters and all of that. Because again, we've seen people rotating in the last 3 weeks and it's really difficult. I don't care how good you are. You could be a player like Jordan Larson, who is one of the smartest and best players in the entire world. It's difficult when you're passing next to new people every day, or you have a new setter coming in because the timing is all different. So I am, a lot of kudos to those players that have been just thrown in and, have to figure out rotations the day of or the day before. But this team looks a lot better. And I think they obviously have the talent to absolutely medal in the VNL and I think medal in the Olympics. The question becomes, how well and how quickly can they gel together to really get comfortable and get some of those connections down, because the Olympics, it's crazy, but it's only like 6 weeks away.
You mentioned Avery and Jordan. Is there anybody else that's stood out to you individually over VNL to this point?
Yeah, I think a few players. I'm, not necessarily surprised, but Jordan Poulter looks great. She stepped right back in her first match out in Brazil. I remember talking to her and I said, do you ever get nervous for games? And she was like, not really, but I'm like kind of really nervous right now for that first game back in Rio. And of course, you have a player that, hasn't played in a year and a half because she blew out her entire knee. You never know what they're going to look like coming back. And surprisingly, but also unsurprisingly, she looked like she stepped in there and led the offense really well. Of course, she's always had great decision making, but you wonder how well she's going to move to the ball. Can she get there quickly, get those, hips and shoulders square? And it looks like she did. So I'm really excited and happy for her to see her back out there and killing it. And then, some of those younger players, I think Dana Recky's been incredible. We've seen her do it in Milan for the last 2 years. And of course we saw it at the University of Wisconsin, but I'm really excited for her. She's also a good friend of mine. So I was pumped to see her make that roster. Not surprisingly so, I think, regardless of maybe how well she was doing, which she's done very well. But at the end of the day, you also need her as a block sub. If you want to put her in there, it's, tough to hit around a girl at 6'8". So I wasn't too worried about her making the roster, but not only that, she's been doing incredible. And I'm pumped to see her play at Eczacıbaşı next year in Turkey as well. So yeah, I think there's some young guns that have been doing well. And obviously the veterans, a player like Jordan Larson, how is she going to do after having, a year off? Like, she's freaking Jordan Larson. What do you mean? She stepped out there and is crushing it. So no worries there. If there were any thoughts of, oh, how is she going to do after not playing? She's Jordan Larson, guys. She's totally fine.
It's like riding a bike. Don't worry about
it. What are we talking about here?
Yeah. How important is that veteran presence? And you mentioned, 8 of the 12 are the veterans, but, Jordan Larson, Kelsey Robinson, how important is that veteran presence on the roster, especially coming off Tokyo Gold and bringing in those 4 newbies as well?
Oh, it's huge. And you have a player like Jordan Larson, playing in her 4th Olympics, which is mind blowing. The fact that you have a player that not only can be, that good, but sustain it for that long. I think it helps so much for some of these younger players, just even with how to handle an Olympics, what it looks like, what to do when you get to Olympic Village and all of these small things, that it's not just going out on the court and playing volleyball. It's being able to manage the game. the Olympic schedule is a lot like VNL where you're playing consistently. You might have a day, 2 days off in between matches, but you have to be able to, control what you can control and make sure you're getting the rest and recovery that you need. And all of these things that some of these younger athletes have never experienced. Of course, they've played long club seasons, probably played long college seasons as well, but it's a whole different beast when you get to the Olympics and you're on the biggest stage, you're playing the best players in the world. Maybe you're playing well, maybe you're not even playing at all. You have to continue to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, that you're understanding what goes into the Olympics, and game management as well. So it's huge to have some of those players that have done it 1, 2, 3 times before to help kind of guide some of those younger players into just the how it works and to show them the ropes a little bit. And then, of course, when they're on the court, it gives you confidence when you're playing next to players that have won gold in the Olympics and, players that have medaled in every single Olympics they've been in, that have won MVP of the Olympics, best libero, best middle, whatever it is. It helps a lot in terms of your confidence as a younger player to know that you're comfortable and the players next to you are confident that they also think they can win.
I'm going to correct myself really quick. Kelsey Robinson Cook. Wanted to make sure I said her name correctly. We're trying to get her on the podcast later too, so I want to keep her happy, make sure she's not mad at us. But yeah, outside of, I really want to get to talk about you as well, but maybe a last question here. Outside of, Tokyo gold medalists, their defending gold medal team, they're going to have a target on their back. They already have a target on their back, of course. What are and from your eye, broadcaster eye, watching all these teams in BNL, who are the teams that are kind of, up in that favorite spot to get the podium?
Poland looks pretty dang good. They're undefeated right now as well as Brazil, but man, I'm pumped to watch those two duke it out. Poland and Brazil for sure, because they're teams that have been playing pretty much the same rosters week to week. So those players look so comfortable playing next to each other. So excited to kind of see what they do. But to me, I think the most exciting team to watch and a team that also could medal is definitely Turkey. They're the number 1 team in the world right now for a reason. They have a player like Melissa Vargas, one of the best opposites, one of the best players in the world. Ibra Karakurt on the outside, who is easily the most exciting player to watch in the entire world. I mean, the way that she hypes up a crowd, the way she hypes up her team. If you let that team get some momentum, it's very tough to stop. And I think USA realized that in Arlington for their last match, that Turkey can get on a big run and that crowd feeds into it and those players feed into it. So right now, I think, there's actually a lot of teams that I think could make a really deep run, not only in VNL, but the Olympics as well. And of course, USA's up there. One team that we haven't necessarily seen throughout the VNL that is bringing a completely different squad to the Olympics is Serbia. And I'm pumped to see them. They kind of held back their big guns like Tijana Boskovic, objectively the best right side in the entire world. And a few other players that we didn't see VNL, we're not going to see during VNL because they've had time to practice next to each other. So while their, world ranking is kind of falling and they're losing most of their VNL matches, that's not the squad they're going to bring to the Olympics. And I'm pretty pumped to see how they do because, the talent that we're going to see at the end of July and early August is going to be insane. So I think I'm pretty pumped to, of course, not only watch the U.S. during the Olympics, but a lot of these other teams that, of course, I've gotten to know really well and watch so much. But there's going to be some really good volleyball once we hit Paris.
Serbia was actually here training in the Anaheim gym, and I was bummed because I was busy during that, but I was like, oh, that'd be so cool to see them. And what you were saying about Karakurt, too, is so neat because, she takes half a lap around to hype up the crowd, which is so cool.
I think if she could, she would go around the entire court just to get everyone up. She knows exactly how to do it.
Go in each row of the stands.
Yes, give it all. I think if she had time to do it between her, she absolutely would.
Well, Emily, we could ask you questions about VNL and the Olympics all day, but as Steven mentioned, we definitely want to ask more about you. And first, I want to start off with how you were introduced to the game of volleyball. I believe I have that you were at Northwestern and a libero from 2016 to 19. And just what was your experience like at Northwestern being an athlete and also balancing that with being a student, which I know is tough for a lot of people as well?
Yeah, I had the absolute best experience in the world. I came in 2016. I was recruited by a different coach. But when I came in, Shane Davis ended up being my coach. It was his first year, my first year. He was and is like a second dad to me. So I absolutely loved it. I think, being at Northwestern, it's really challenging balancing the academic part of it. You're at a top 10 institution, and also the athletics part of it, because you're playing in the Big Ten, which is the toughest volleyball conference. So you're balancing two of the hardest things. And me, knowing exactly what I wanted to do from an early age with journalism and with broadcasting, I really threw a lot into school as well. So the balance part of it, you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I balance academics, athletics, having a social life, and also sleeping? So naturally I didn't sleep very much because you got to pick three of them. So it was fun. It was a fun 4 years, and in all sense of the word, I loved my schooling. I, threw myself at it and tried to do as much as possible. Volleyball wise, you have to throw yourself at it. And then, I was involved in other things outside of those. I was in a sorority. I tried to join all the clubs I could, and, explore Chicago because it's the best city in the world where I still live. So I had the best time. I think, we were a program too that we weren't very good. I think my first year we won like 2 Big Ten games. And then I think by the year I graduated, we won maybe 6. And of course the program's doing a lot better than they were then. But man, it was so much fun. I had the best 4 years, and it not only set me up in terms of course, volleyball to get into what I'm doing now, but also just school wise, it was very hands-on. The journalism program was to, set me up to do what I wanted to do, make the connections in the industry, and get practice as well, which is really important when you want to get into broadcasting.
Yeah, I'm always curious what other journalism schools are like at other colleges. So love to hear more about that. You said it was very hands-on. Yeah. Were you thrown into like any other like collegiate sports? Doing stories, sideline reporting, any of that kind of stuff, or broadcasting as well?
Yeah, we what I did was, you had different clubs. You had like a student radio club, and you had like a weekly talk show, like sports panel type of thing. And I wasn't really able to do too much with those clubs just because of volleyball and the school, the academic schedule. But a lot of our classes were really hands-on. So, we're getting some of our professors are, world-renowned journalists. Someone like Christine Brennan was always dropping in. Jay Adonde was my, sports commentary professor, which is crazy. Like you see his face on ESPN all the time. Yeah. So that definitely helps. And you have people that are teaching you that have so many years of experience in the industry. But a lot of our classes were hands-on in the sense that, we were forced to make podcasts or, film, 2-minute segments on whatever the heck we wanted was going on in sports that week, or a lot of written articles. And when I came into the journalism program, it changed a little bit. They used to do tracks. So you could do broadcasting track, magazine, newspaper, kind of whatever you wanted. And then when I got in, they actually consolidated all of them and wanted you to be a really well-rounded journalist. So you got experience doing everything. And a lot of that was a lot of writing and reporting, which I knew I never wanted to do. I always could write, wasn't the best writer, in comparative to some of my classmates who, like actually got into the school without, athletics, and were like these crazy journalists who had already been working for papers and doing all of that. And, Mia had some experience, but I'm like, part of the reason, of course, I got in was because of athletics. So I felt very behind all the time. But in terms of writing, I felt really, really behind. I thought I was a decent writer, but these people were doing, freelancing for some of the best outlets. And I think it really forced me to get outside of my comfort zone. And I had to put a lot into becoming a good writer, which I didn't necessarily want to do because I knew that I didn't want to write. But looking back, and, I realized quickly out of college that being able to write on paper or whatever online really helped me as a broadcaster develop my voice. And, not that I'd script out really into my pieces or what I'm saying at all, but it helps you think about the way you're saying things and how to vary, sentences and the reporting aspect of it, how to implement that into broadcasting rather than writing. So it wasn't the exact journalism program that I thought that I was getting into in terms of being heavily broadcast, but it really helped me later on really develop that voice, and I think really helped me to what I'm doing now.
believe I read also that you were inspired by your uncle, Dan Dockich, as well. And I mean, that's got to be such a great person to learn from, in addition to all the great experience that you got at Northwestern. Is there anything specific or any kind of early memories that you have with him also kind of inspiring your broadcasting career?
Oh yeah. Yeah. He, a lot of different things. So he actually used to coach Indiana basketball he's a head coach for a year, and we would go there, obviously went to every game, and I'm from Bloomington, Indiana. So, sports were everything. I played every sport growing up, and to have my cousins there while he was coaching and living there was fun. And my older cousin, Laura, she's a year older than me, actually introduced me to the game. So, I wanted to play volleyball because she did, and I always looked up to her. So that definitely helped me get into the sport. And then in terms of broadcasting, after he was done coaching, he was a ESPN basketball commentator, and he would come do Indiana games all the time. And so I remember one game, I just came and kind of shadowed him and saw what it was like to call a game and to follow around the sideline reporter. And I was like 9 years old at this time. I was really young. And I remember it clicking, like, this is the coolest job in the world. I don't have to coach. I don't have to play, but I can work in sports. And I was always getting in trouble for talking. Every single report card I had was like, talks too much, doesn't shut up, is way too loud. So it's like, well, I might as well make a career out of it. If I'm talking too much, I might as well get paid for it. And at 9, it clicked like, hey, this is something I could be really good at. So all my life since I was, about 9 or 10, realized that I wanted to get into broadcasting. I loved sports, coming from Indiana. Everyone lives, sleeps, and breathes sports. And that was always something that was really important to me. And, once I got into high school, I started taking the journalism classes. And then, when I went through recruiting for volleyball, really only looked at schools that had good journalism programs to try to get me to where I was. So yeah, I definitely give a lot of thanks to him, my uncle, for helping me into the industry and showing me the ropes early on. And then of course, like, in college, trying to get internships, it definitely helps when you have some connections, of course.
A lot of athletes go into, coaching or like yourself, broadcasting. Do you have any advice for, a collegiate athlete who, is not maybe looking to take that next step into pro, but wanting to move more into like journalism, broadcasting? Any advice for an athlete who's kind of looking into that career path?
Oh, absolutely. My biggest piece of advice for someone wanting to get into broadcasting is always just get as many reps as possible. You don't have to be tied to a network, a team, a league to put out content or to just get reps. I always tell people, if you want to put together a reel, which normally you're, putting snippets together from TV hits or, sideline reporting that you're doing, you can literally just go stand in front of an arena, put a blazer on, put a camera up, and act like you're doing a stand-up. You don't have to be on a network to do that. You can act like it's game day, write an opening hit or an opening segment and just get reps that way. It's really easy to do. Again, you don't have to be tied to anything to do it. And the other thing is, if you want to get into maybe the content space as well, just start posting. It's great now because you don't have to be tied to a TV, radio, whatever it is, kind of network to put out content. Social media is the platform that you can use. You can, just talk about whatever it is that is your niche or that the most about. Start posting TikToks, Reels, to Twitter, whatever it is, because you never know who's going to see it. And it's a really good way to get reps. That's what I did right out of college. I just started posting about Big Ten volleyball and doing interviews with players and coaches to, of course, get reps in the space. And then that was kind of the biggest thing. And the only thing that I knew really well in sports was volleyball. So, just start posting and start doing it. And, you get practice doing it. You never know who's going to see it. And it's a way to get reps, because similar to sports, the only way that you're going to get better is to get more repetitions.
Emily, just looking at your resume, it's incredibly impressive. Like Big Ten Network, Fox Sports, Volleyball World, NCAA, ESPN, Volleyball Mag as well. And when you started, I think it's with Big Ten Volley Talk. Did you ever envision getting to the level that you're at now and just being able to do what you do?
No, it's, I feel like every time I call a game, it's like a pinch me moment. When I started Big Ten Volley Talk, it was just basically like a web show right out of college. because I graduated in March of 2020, it was like literally the worst possible time to try to break into sports. I never imagined being in the volleyball space. A big reason for that was because this space didn't really exist for broadcasting. You know, when I grew up, there were like, I don't know, 10 matches on TV a year and on Big Ten Network, and maybe, you know, the NCAA tournament, regionals and semifinals and finals, maybe. As I got older, it became a sport that was on TV more, that people talked about more. And by the time I graduated, I could tell that volleyball was in a place where it was about to kind of take that leap. And for me, I wanted to capitalize on that. So I knew, of course, I knew Big Ten volleyball really well, having played in it and having connections there. But the biggest thing was, okay, I need to get reps. Let's just start posting these videos. And it's a space and a fan base that I knew was so passionate about it. So I started posting these videos, and, you know, it started blowing up a little bit. And I pitched myself to all these different organizations and really grinded it out for the first year or so. You know, pitching myself as a digital host to Athletes Unlimited, which worked out. Pitching myself as a commentator to Big Ten Network, which I don't even know why they threw me on a game. It was like a Nebraska game, which how was that possible that was the first match I was ever on? I think I was going to pee my pants. But again, I never really wanted to be in this space, or I never thought that I could do it, because it wasn't a space that anyone really was in or making a living off of. And even up until probably a year ago, 2 years ago, there really weren't any broadcasters that were just doing volleyball. So for me, no, it wasn't a space I ever saw myself in, because I always wanted to do what I saw women doing on TV, which was sideline reporting for men's basketball or football, or being a host of, you know, on like SportsCenter or some kind of show. So I never dreamed of being a volleyball commentator or a digital host, because those didn't necessarily exist. And I've done a lot of other sports. You know, I've done sidelines for football. I've covered a Women's College World Series, a men's lacrosse Final Four. I've covered playoff games for FBS and college football playoff. All those are really fun and exciting and cool events to be a part of. But I think at the end of the day, I always come back to the fact that I would always rather be calling a volleyball match. That's something that I love doing. I feel like I'm getting better at, and I'm finding a place to make a name for myself in a sport that's exploding, that I care about so much. So no, I don't know if I ever dreamed of doing exactly what I'm doing, but the way the sport has evolved and progressed and exploded, it's allowed the avenue for me to kind of make a living in volleyball, which I never dreamed of doing. And 2 years ago, I probably would have said, you probably need a side job, because you're not going to be able to support yourself just being the volleyball girl.
I think it's inspiring and also reassuring just to, you know, see someone like yourself who's had so much professional success to this point, and then just to hear that even you had a little self-doubt to start with, especially when, you know, just a little of my opinion, you project so much confidence and just a great air on air that I think for anybody aspiring to do what you do, it's nice to hear that, you know, there was even a little bit of a doubt at time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I will say another big piece of advice that I always tell people early on in their career, or, you know, really ever say you're covering a sport that you've never done before, as long as you sound confident, people will believe what you're saying, you know, and not to say like I'm spewing stuff that isn't true, but, you know, if you project yourself as confident, people are more, you listen easier, you connect with the broadcaster easier. And that's something that even if I'm really nervous before a game, or if I'm, again, covering a sport that maybe I don't know very well. So, for example, I mentioned the men's lacrosse Final Four. I remember, you know, going out to Jersey to cover that a few years back, and I had no idea what I was doing. You know, I understood the basics of lacrosse, but I was like, I am not qualified to do this. I don't know who hired me to do this or why they hired me to do this, but as long as I sound like I know what I'm doing, no one will question it. Because once you start questioning yourself, and that, you know, projects out into your voice, then people aren't willing to listen as much, and you don't give them as much credibility. So I hope I come off that way. Even if I have literally no idea what I'm doing, I at least try to sound like I know what I'm doing.
I use that same mentality when I'm behind the grill. As long as you look like you know what you're doing, flip a burger here and there.
Yeah, no one knows what the stand-up looks like unless they cut into it.
That's exactly. It's right.
Well, lacrosse is tough too.
Until you make it.
Yeah, lacrosse is tough too. Like, how do you wrap your head around, you know, 10 goals, letting in 10 goals as a goalie is a good game. Like that one still, I don't get that.
Yeah, I'm like, these people are doing terrible. What's happening? And then you realize the average score is whatever or whatever. And you're like, oh, okay, well, they're good.
You mentioned you kind of briefly talked about just the sport progressing, evolving, throughout your career as both an athlete and now into broadcasting. You were a part of a record-breaking match at Nebraska as far as fan attendance, viewership. What was it like to be part of such a historic match? Not only as a broadcaster, but being in that space for so long, being in volleyball.
Oh my God, every time I think about that day, I get so emotional because one, I was actually so emotional and was a wreck. Like I remember 30 seconds before we're going live on air, we're on camera, my producer hits me and was like, 30 seconds. I'm sobbing. Like my mascara is everywhere. I'm like, I am not equipped for this. But it was so special to be a part of, not only just as a volleyball fan, like it would have just been cool to go to the match, but to have the opportunity to call that match and, to be the voice in the face of people that are seeing this history unfold was unfathomable to me. I got into this industry. I started calling matches in 2021, so really not that long ago. And so to be that voice in the face for such a historic and monumental time and event in our sport, I was so emotional to see that many people in a stadium come together for volleyball and not just for volleyball, but for a women's sporting event was the coolest thing on the planet. If you would have told us that 10 years ago that you would have packed 92,000 people into a stadium to watch a volleyball match, everyone would have said you're absolutely insane, especially not in the US, maybe in a place like, like Brazil or like Turkey, like Italy. Those things just don't happen in the US for women's sports. And they're starting to happen more and more because people are realizing that obviously women's sports is really fun to watch, but volleyball specifically, like this sport is so cool and so much fun. And when you turn it on, it's hard to turn off. And when you go to a match, you're so impressed by the athleticism, yet grace all these players have, and just, the confidence and dominance and aggression that we see from them is so much fun. And, whenever I think back to that match, I just am just reminded how lucky I am to be a part of the sport at a time where it's exploding. And, firsthand, like we get to see how big the sport is getting. And, I hope 50 years from now, we're looking back on, this time and realizing how pivotal it is for the sport to not only get so many fans and seats, but also to get more viewership on TV and more games on. And at a time where, we're really seeing the sport explode, all these new pro leagues. And hopefully we can look back and say, that happened in, the early 2020s.
Obviously, we're hoping that you stay in volleyball, and I know a lot of other fans are as well, but are there other sports besides volleyball that you would like to cover?
At this point, I feel like I've covered a lot of the sports that I always dreamed of covering. And no, I always come back to it. Always rather be calling a volleyball match or working volleyball. Right now, I have no interest in going to other sports. I can make a good living off of staying in volleyball. And again, that also wasn't a thing or something that existed 3-4 years ago. Every analyst that you would listen to also had another job because you had to support yourself. Right now, I'm making a living off of just working in volleyball, and I absolutely love it. So I hope to stay in volleyball, like in not only volleyball, because I do still cover other sports, but I hope my main thing is volleyball as long as I can make it. And, I have some goals in the space that I want to get to. And I kind of don't really want to stop until I hit those.
Do you have any favorite interviews that you've done throughout your career? Could be in volleyball, could be outside of volleyball.
Yeah. I still remember the first time I got to interview Jordan Larson, which was in the bubble for Athletes Unlimited season 1. And it's funny now because, I feel like I can go talk to her anytime or, on the sidelines, we'll catch up, or before Nebraska games all last year, we'd always say hey and give a hug and all that, which is insane to think about because I remember being in Dallas. It was one of my first interviews with Athletes Unlimited, and I was like, I have to get Jordan, and I completely blacked out during the whole thing. Like I have no idea what I said. But it was so memorable for me to this player that, really started in the sport, like right when I was really getting into it. I think back to that 2012 Olympics. And that was like, I think really when I started remembering watching volleyball and like remember watching that team and watching her. So to interview someone that I had looked up to for so many years was so cool. And again, I have no idea what I even said. So I hope that interview never sees the light of day. I don't even know if it did, but that was memorable. Other than that, I think, the players that are most fun are the players with the most personality. So like anytime I get to talk to a Haley Washington, I am just like, you make my job so easy. It's so much fun. You're always getting fun sound bites and she just kind of lets it rip.
Just sit back and relax, like let it happen.
Before she'll go on for like 10 minutes and I'm gold.
I think if more people in the world were like Haley Washington, the world would be a much better place. She's the best.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and for so many reasons, she is an outstanding person, obviously incredible volleyball player. But again, as media, like she makes my job so easy and is just so much fun to be around.
Emily, I'd be remiss if I didn't go back to the prep process and sort of, I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on, obviously I know that you mentioned sometimes you just get the roster a day before and it's tough to kind of put things together, but when you maybe do have a little bit more time to prep, what does that look like for you? Are you making boards? Are you kind of someone who would just rather not have a lot of notes in front of you and just be able to really watch what's going on and then take it from there? And the follow-up to all that is, has it evolved since you started calling games to maybe where it is now versus when you started?
Yeah, I will say my prep is pretty similar to when I first started calling games. So I'll kind of take you through kind of how I prep for a college game because it's, one match and I can really dive in. Again, VNL is different because I have these teams so many times and you're kind of just updating stats and numbers and all of that. But if I'm starting a college match, let's say I've never had these teams before, I create a board, which is kind of a chart with rosters and information for each team. So I'll put in the team information, what their record is, what their stats have been compared to their opponent, head coach information, their background, assistant coach information, their background, what the team did during the last game, what their schedule looks like, how they did last season, where they finished, where they were in the NCAA tournament. And then I'll kind of dive into the players. So, you put all the roster information in, numbers, name, where they're from, their height, and then I'll put in their position and statistics for the year. So, depending on the player, let's take an outside hitter, like hit percentage, kills per set, blocks per set, and what they pass. So a lot of different just information like that. And so once I have kind of that skeleton of a board with information, then I go in and start adding more background and scouting those players. So what I'll always do for both teams is watch the last game that they did and see how they did and watch, hitter tendencies, where the setters like to go in what situations, what the tempo is for some of those setters. Rotationally, what are their good rotations? Where have they struggled? Just in general, kind of their systems and how they play. How often do they go to the back row on attack, or, what they look like in serve receive. And so I'll watch those last games over for both teams. And then I go into volumetrics, and that's where I like really dive into more of the scouting stuff. And I'll always do hitter tendencies. So, where those attackers like to hit, where's their power shot? How often do they tip? Do they go to off speeds very often? Are they just going to absolutely swing away? Things like that for all the hitters. And then setters, again, setter tendencies, do they set away from the flow? If they're moving forward, do they like to jack it back? How quick the set is to the outside with tempo and all of these things. So, it's a long process to get through just one match. But again, after I've had a team for, more than one or two games, you already get familiar and you already have that board kind of established and written out. And then only after all of that do I want to talk to the head coach, which we always do before college matches. We'll talk to the head coach of both teams and kind of talk about his thoughts of where the team is at, what are their goals for the year? Do they have a mantra? And then on the court, like, who's impressed you lately? What did you see from X player in the last match that, allowed them to have success? Ideally, what percentage of the back row attack would you like to use? What are rotations that you feel like you need to work on? What's the biggest strength, weakness of this team? Kind of all those questions that you would want to ask a head coach to really understand their thoughts on the team and where they want to be, what they want to work on, where they've seen that team improve, and all of that. So it's really nice in the college game where, again, we kind of get handed a lot of this information that I can plug into my boards. We also do get to talk to the head coaches before every match. In a tournament like VNL, that's not necessarily the case. So we kind of have to adjust in that way. But a lot of prep goes into it, needless to say. I'm someone that very much over preps. I know you mentioned, that there are people I've worked with that will just show up with a blank roster and feel like that's enough and get after it. I am not one of those people. I am writing so much in my boards and in my notes that maybe I use 10% of it during a broadcast, but it really helps me learn the team. If I'm writing it down and, writing what the player did last season, what accolades do they have? Are they at an Olympic champ? The college game, are they an All-American? What they did during their last game, what coach said about them, all of these things. So it helps me learn the team a lot better when I write down a lot in those notes. But then at the end of the day, you're kind of just reacting to the play on the court. And if you can weave in some of those things like, oh, they're really targeting line this game. We've seen over the last few matches that they've really gone heavily cross court. Those are adjustments that, or information that I can tell a viewer that helps the broadcast that is specifically coming from my prep. That helps a lot.
And just to quickly follow up on all the stats and all the great prep that you do, and like you sort of just mentioned right there, but during a match, is there a specific set of stats or a specific thing you'll look for to really tell the story of the game that kind of shifts to that during sort of part of your broadcast?
Yeah, one thing I do try to bring in is how a player did during the last match. So, you can see like maybe they had a down match or maybe they had a really good match. Or tendencies. Again, they were really hammering cross court last match and they're really getting after the line, or we didn't see many back row attacks from them last game, but we are this game. So I think those kind of adjustments I always like because they kind of can tell a story of, how well-rounded a player is, or if they maybe just had an off match, or have they really worked on something, or things like that. So I always kind of like to reference the last match or two and where they're at. And it really helps during VNL when you're calling all the matches because you can remember them a lot easier and reference past matches.
That is so cool. I feel like you just hosted a masterclass for us. That was awesome. All the media listeners and all the volley nerds just sat up a little bit listening to you talk about your prep. That was so cool. Thank you for that.
I talk to a lot of college students or people that are getting just started in broadcasting, and I always share my boards with them because I like how I set it up. I've had a lot of people take that and use it to set up their boards just to know what I'm looking at because it definitely helps. And again, if there's anyone that's calling volleyball out there, shoot me a DM. I'm happy to share information or talk over things because I had those people that were really helpful to me early on, and I kind of want to spread the love and help out as much as I can so that, next gen of broadcasters coming in can, be helped out and get to their goals.
That's awesome. I want to check in really quick. I think we got like a couple more questions, but I want to check on time for you. Are you still good?
I'm good. Yeah.
Awesome.
I got nothing.
Kind of touched on it a little bit, but let's talk about the pro leagues a little bit that are popping up in the US here in the last couple of years and next year with Love. What are you seeing? Can you give us some insight on the leagues? The support that's coming out for them, anything like that?
Yeah, I think the support's been crazy. So we had Pro Volleyball Federation that started last January, and I was lucky to call their first match ever. And I think that no one knew what it was going to be. It's a league that's starting out. You're trying to figure everything out, and I think right away they figured out the support is there. A team like the Supernovas in Omaha, average like 10, 11,000 fans per match, which is absolutely insane. Those are numbers that you see at only select college arenas and college matches. So I think we've seen the support is there. It takes leagues a few years to get going. Of course, there's going to be hiccups early on. It was so exciting to see that, CBS Sports Network came in and picked up a lot of matches at the end of PBF season. And we saw, so many fans watching, so many fans in the building for those, and a really successful end of the season for PBF that I think a lot of people are really excited about. And then, starting this winter, we'll have two functioning at the same time with PBF and then with League One volleyball. And I'm pumped for it. I think what people don't understand is there's a lot of countries that have multiple volleyball leagues and they thrive. It's difficult for us to understand because we have, one league that is doing well and they can't fathom having another one, but that just means we're going to have more volleyball, which is great for everyone. I'm really excited to see, the reaction for some of those markets where there's two teams. For example, like in Omaha, we saw the support for PVF and people really connecting with that team pretty early on throughout the season. How are they going to do when we have another pro team there as well? And I think it's going to be the same thing. I think there'll be great support because that state loves volleyball. I'm also excited to see, in a place like Madison, Wisconsin, how many Wisconsin fans are going to show up for, to watch players like Lauren Carlini and, Danielle Hart and these players that were legends there that are now signed to those teams. I think it's great for the sport of volleyball. It's amazing that a league like League One got a TV deal from ESPN. To me, that's the only way that you're going to grow these leagues is to get those big TV deals and to show volleyball on a bigger network, because the only way to grow it is to be able to stumble upon it. And, you just flip on ESPN because that's what a lot of people do while they're making dinner or whatever. You're watching a volleyball game. All of a sudden you're a volleyball fan because it's so hard to turn off and it's so fun to watch. So to me, that's the biggest piece in growing the sport is to put it on TV more and to get more viewership and to get those fans that don't already like volleyball to stumble upon it and watch.
Is there anything you're looking to see from League One and kind of their first start process? Obviously, as you mentioned with the ESPN announcement, there feels like they're making a big one almost every week and have signed almost all of our national team athletes, it feels like. But is there anything that you're looking for in the starting first couple of years that will kind of identify to you, okay, this is different than maybe some other leagues that have come and gone in the past?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I'm interested to see for League One is fan support, because I think we don't exactly know what kind of arenas they're going to play in. I know the setup sounds a little bit different than what we see from PVF, where they're playing in these massive arenas that are pretty set. It sounds like they're going to travel around and bring in multiple teams kind of over like one weekend or things like that, just from rumblings. And I'm interested to see how that sustains because, from talking to people in the league, like they've got it down to a T. This league's been around since, 2020. They've had a few years to really gather themselves and to put the infrastructure in place to not only be successful, but be sustainable. So I'm really excited to see that play out, mostly because, like you mentioned, the talent is there. Like they've signed, essentially the entire national team to play, which is absolutely mind-boggling. But you would assume that that's going to translate into fans coming into the building and, TV networks getting involved with it. So I'm excited to see the growth of that. And of course, again, it might not be what we expect for year one because it's the beginning of a league. No league is getting these insane TV deals and is filling stands to the brim every single match because it's year one and people haven't had time to connect with the players or the teams or anything like that. That would be insane for any league in any sport. But I'm excited to see the growth that we see, from start to finish and then from year one to year two, because League One does seem like a league to me that they have the right people in place to do it. And they have pretty dang good talent on the court to make it exciting.
Yeah, I'm certainly excited. Volleyball fans are eating well, for sure. We're essentially going to get volleyball year round, which is going to be great. Yep. You kind of talked about specifically, any collegiate athletes, young women who are trying to get into broadcasting, but could you maybe expand on that a little bit and just, do you have any advice for any young women, college athletes that are trying to get into the sports world, at any level, any part?
Yeah. People always talk about networking and how great it is, but I really think that's important. Not only, if you want to go into broadcasting, getting reps, of course, that's great, but really in any capacity, say you want to do sales or anything in the front office or operations, content, whatever it is, networking is huge. And that could look like a variety of things. Maybe it's going to some of these big events and tracking down people that you've researched. I used to do this in college all the time, like any networking event I would constantly go to and, stay as long as possible and run the gamut of talking to whoever, whether it was someone in ticket sales or someone in business ops or marketing or like all these things that I knew I didn't want to do. But at the end of the day, it creates those connections in the industry and maybe with a network or a team or league, whatever it is that could be helpful in the future. I had a few internships during college, but I had one before my senior year of college at Big Ten Network working in digital. I always knew I wanted to work in TV. But what I did during that internship was I met with as many producers as I possibly could, because even though they weren't my boss, I hoped down the line that maybe they would be my boss, or I could learn more about the industry and just pick their brain a little bit. And then later on down the line, that ends up being really beneficial for me because I can call up these producers as I'm, starting my own web show or getting reps at certain things where I can have them take a look at my work or just give me a little bit of guidance. So I think regardless of what sector, what industry you want to go in sports, really important to just reach out to whoever, whether that's LinkedIn. I feel like I became a professional at tracking down emails of people like through the back end of websites and all of that just to figure out, or, just hoping that typing in like john.smith@whatever.com email is going to go through and firing off like 10 emails because you never know. So I think, that's really big, just connecting with people in the industry that you want to get in contact with or think that you might be interested in, just to learn more about it. And because it could really help you down the line.
Thank you for sharing that and appreciate all you're doing in the sport and offering yourself as a great resource to the next generation who's coming up in the sports industry. Such a competitive one, but such a cool one to be a part of. So any leg up for that next generation is going to be huge for them. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the biggest compliment or thing that makes me most happy that I hear, like I'll have, dads DM me or moms come up to me at games and say, hey, my daughter who's 10 watches you and says she wants to do that when she's older. And that is the coolest thing in the entire world, because when I was growing up, I got to watch girls, only be on the sidelines during football games or basketball games or sitting at a sports center desk. I never saw a volleyball commentator on TV. I didn't even know that was a job until like 5 years ago. So it's so cool that there's this next generation that was the age that I found out that I wanted to be a broadcaster and saying, hey, I want to do that job. For me, it is so, so cool. It always makes me emotional to hear young girls, either coming up to me or shooting me a DM if they're in college, or again, having parents come up and say, hey, my daughter wants to do that. It's the coolest thing in the world.
So we've talked about a lot of your accomplishments and obviously, going back to that Nebraska game and how great that was for you as well. For some looking on the outside probably think she's got it all. There could be no aspirations left, but I'm betting that's not the case. So with that being said, Emily, do you have an ultimate career goal right now that is kind of currently in your mind?
Yeah, two big ones. One, I want to call an NCAA national championship. That's a big goal right now. Last year, I was lucky enough to be chosen to call the regional matches, so the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games on ESPN, which I remember when our head producer called me, I just started crying, which I will say, again, I guess I talked about crying during the Nebraska game, but I don't cry very often, only for these like big career moments just get me emotional. And for whatever reason, like big sports moments in general, even if I'm watching on TV, just like make me cry because I feel like I get it. But I want to call a national championship. That's a goal I've had now for about 2 years and really want to get there at some point. Of course, we have a fantastic crew right now with Holly McPeak and Courtney Lyle, who are like the absolute top. So somewhere down the line, I would love to get in there and call it, or even just be a part of the national championship. Maybe that's doing studio coverage on the side. I would love to do that over the next 2 years, but I want to call that national championship match. And then down the line, would love to call the Olympics. That's a huge goal of mine right now. It would be great to be a part of LA in some capacity. Again, if they do a studio show or sidelines, whatever it is, I would love to be a part of an Olympic broadcast crew. So those are the two big ones right now. Again, mainly both just in the volleyball space. Other than that, I think it's been fun over the last few years to have smaller goals and to get those kind of chipped off, like, calling NCAA tournament matches, things like that are going to NCAA tournament as well, that have been exciting to have those smaller goals to kind of chip away at.
Well, I have no doubt that you will reach that goal for sure. And it's out in the airwaves now. So if ESPN, NBC, you're listening, look no further. She's right here.
We're manifesting it.
Yep. Emily, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down. This has been a spectacular conversation. where can people find you? You've already offered yourself up as a resource for the next generation of broadcasters, but where can people find you, follow you along your journey?
Yeah. Well, I do a lot for digital, on Big Ten Network. And so you can find me B1G Volleyball. My face is there a lot, unfortunately. So I do a lot of content there, but yeah, I, Twitter and Instagram at Emily Ehman. So just my name. And then if you want to get in contact with me again, I do try to help aspiring broadcasters a lot. I do have a website. It's just my name, emilyehman.com. You can fill out a form and I'm pretty responsive if I'm not traveling for long periods of time. But yeah, to anyone that wants to get into broadcasting or maybe is in it and wants a little bit more guidance, I'm always here to help. I want to be a resource to anyone that wants to get involved. So yeah, please reach out and don't hesitate. I'll have a good amount of time off after VNL is over. So excited to kind of settle down a little bit and catch up on some stuff.
Anything else that we left on the table that you might want to talk about, or any shout outs you want to give?
Ooh, I think we hit it all, but I think the one thing that as a broadcaster, or really anyone that works in media, that people maybe don't think about, or, you get glamorized for covering all these big events or whatever it is. But obviously, you're traveling for long periods of the time. The road gets kind of lonely. So I'm really lucky to have a support system, with both my parents and, friends and family that are really great to me, that know if I'm in the thick of it on the road, I'm probably really tired, maybe not feeling so great at some of these locations, or, even if it's just a few days trip during, the fall where you're traveling 4 or 5 days a week, it does get really tough. But I'm so lucky to have the best support system in place, that really helps when, you might be down, you might not be, feeling great, but my parents have been so great. They watch every single match that I do, along with, most of my grandparents as well, which I don't think most people can say. My grandpa texts me during every single match, and actually kind of helps me out because he'll ask questions that are helpful for me in a broadcast. I remember during the USA match, I think it was last week, he was like, "Oh, USA is running a lot more slides than we normally see." And I'm like, "Oh, Grandpa, you're right. Who, just started watching volleyball a few years ago, but then I'm talking about it on air because I assume the viewer's like, what the heck's going on?" So I'm so lucky to have people that support me so much and to watch what I do and really help me out in that way. So yeah, definitely huge shout out to mom, dad, brother, grandparents, cousins, best friends that always are watching and supportive, because, it really does take a village. I work with the best talent coach on the planet, Jill Montgomery. I watch back every single match that I do during the fall, and we absolutely tear it apart. So that's been really helpful for me to not only get better as a broadcaster, but as a person, that's someone that's really pushed me. So huge support system behind the scenes that makes everything happen. Otherwise, I am not where I am at all.
I imagine your family, who I'm sure cares a lot about the volleyball too, but when they see your face come on the screen, they just lose it, I'm sure, and cheer really loud.
Grandma's always like, "Why can't we see more of your face?" I'm like, "But did you listen, Grandma?"
Well, Emily, thank you so much again for taking the time. I know you're really busy right now, but safe travels to Hong Kong, and then, throughout the rest of the BNL as well. And hopefully we'll see you down the road soon.
Yeah. Thank you guys. This was awesome. I'm so glad we could make it work. And I'm pumped to hopefully see USA and Thailand, and then excited to watch the Olympics as well. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. And yeah, enjoyed that Rocky marathon too.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. We'll talk later.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye. No, not throwing any shade on any of our past guests, but that had to have been has to be one of my favorite conversations in a while, at least, on this podcast. She was phenomenal, such a great conversation. And like she said, she enjoys talking to volleyball people about volleyball. I felt kind of the same way, flipped to media. I enjoyed talking media with a media person. So that was a lot of fun, but loved hearing more about her background and why she got into sports broadcasting, and just to, her own family history in that industry. And then, her inspiration of seeing it at a young age. I think she said 9, 10, she saw it on TV, and then that's what she wanted to do, was be a sports broadcaster and work in sports, and just the grind that it took to get where she is now. but she's killing it. She's all over the volleyball scene. You've heard her voice, you've seen her face many times on many different networks in volleyball, and it won't stop now, or won't stop there. As she mentioned in her goals, she wants to call Olympics and an NCAA championship game as well. So I'm sure we'll see her at that level, at that stage in her career very soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, Emily was fantastic. And I think that just being able to hear the perspective of a media member, just from what she sees, I think was fantastic. I think getting to hear about her journey, and she seems so down to earth for someone who's had so much success at this point in her career already. And it's just great to kind of, you see someone from afar, you admire their work, and then when you get to talk to them a little bit and realize how grounded they are, it's fantastic. And I just think she brings such great insight and broadcasting presence. I mean, I think she just does such a good job with, when she said she's only been doing Volleyball World, I think for a year or a couple of years prior to
her second year of BNL. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the way that she knows kind of when to jump in and what different observations or stats to use, I think is incredible. And then obviously, her interviewing skills are fantastic. I have so much respect for Emily, and just being able to talk to her was amazing.
Yeah, I could see you nerding out a little bit too. I was as well, and she was hosting a masterclass for us, talking about sports media. It was really cool, and hopefully the listeners got a little bit from it too, and got a little bit of that behind the scenes of a different part of the volleyball matches that they watch. They're watching the athletes play, doing their thing on the court. But now they can kind of get a little bit more respect, a little bit more insight on what the broadcasters are doing behind the scenes as well, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah, and I love even being able to hear about what she thinks about the other countries competing as well, not just USA Volleyball. Right, and I think that when you get to talk to someone who gets to watch all of the matches, getting that perspective as well is really great, and certainly gives us some more things to watch as we go through the rest of this VNL season here.
Yeah, definitely. And looking forward to hearing Emily calling the matches here moving forward. I think she was heading to Hong Kong next. Hopefully she enjoyed her Rocky Marathon on the plane as well. But looking forward to her calling VNL week 3, and then, of course, the finals as well. And hopefully we'll see US in those finals too.
Yeah, I feel like if I was in her shoes, I would have every subscription to every streaming service that you were always having something to watch on the plane. They rotate around, Steven. Sometimes your favorite shows and TV are not necessarily all in one platform. So I feel like that's got to be a must in her position.
That's right. And it changes country to country too. And different offerings, for on those platforms in different countries. But, yeah, the miles that she's racking up traveling with VNL, she's got to have a whole slate of content that she's watching, and keeping in her backlog.
Yeah, and one more thing too, I think that was great to hear is that she said that she still loves the travel and everything, and I think that's important. If you're getting kind of bogged down with the minutia of traveling, I feel like that could be something that kind of takes away from all the great things that she's able to do, and it sounds like it's not slowing her down. So that was one I was like, okay, good. As long as she's flying first class, getting all the sky miles that she needs, perfect, because we don't want the travel to be taking down any of the excitement and joy from her job, because I know that the travel could definitely wear on some individuals with how much she's doing, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and it sounds like she's got a great support system too with her family to lean on. I know when the travel gets a little bit too much and needs just a little bit of a break, a mental break, just having her family there to talk to and know that they're there back home cheering her on, celebrating her, and they watch every match too that she calls, which is super cool.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Well, I know that, speaking for both of us, we just want to say thank you again to Emily for taking the time out of her busy schedule to talk to us. As I hope that she and our listeners can tell, we were just super appreciative, and just great to have her on as a guest. I think now it's time to transition into some upcoming events and take a look ahead for us. And we'll do that as we're nearing the end of qualifier season already, which is crazy to believe. But we'll go through a couple that we have coming up in Carolina. First, it's the Charlotte Open National Qualifier. That's June 15th through 16th in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then we have Iowa, the Midwest National Qualifier, June 22nd in Des Moines. And that's, of course, good luck to all those athletes and clubs competing. If you want more details and all of the upcoming events that you need to find, you know that it's on usavolleyball.org. And yeah, it's still definitely event season, but it's coming kind of to a little bit of an end. So the craziness maybe going down a little.
Just a little bit, but not much, because we're ramping up in the summer too with some big events. But before that, on the pro side of things, the Beach U19 national team training block, June 10th through the 14th in Hermosa Beach, California. The FIVB Women's Volleyball Nations League Week 3, June 10th through the 16th in Japan. The Men's U21 Norseca Continental Championship, June 11th through the 16th in Mexico. The World Paravolley Women's Super 6, June 11th through the 16th in France. We have the Beach Pro Tour Futures Women Only, June 13th through the 16th in Poland. The Beach Pro Tour Futures, June 13th through the 16th in France. The Beach U19 National Team Trials, June 17th through the 20th, also in Hermosa Beach, California. The FIVB Men's Volleyball Nations League Week 3, June 18th through the 23rd in Manila, Philippines. And I mistakenly added this to the pro side. This should have been up in your section, but the 2024 USA Volleyball Girls Junior National Championship 11s, 13s in Dallas, Texas. That's June 21st through the 24th. And I will be there on the ground for that one. So we're super excited to attend that event. But good luck to all those athletes competing, and safe travels. Check out usavolleyball.org for all other updates. Now, remember, listeners, you can rate and review, share with friends, family, teammates. It really helps this podcast grow and reach new listeners. And check out our video episodes as well on our website and YouTube channel. We thank you for your continued support. Do you have a topic that you'd like to hear about, or maybe you know a club or parents, athlete that should be featured on the podcast? You can email us at the USAVshow@usav.org. Leave us feedback and let us know about any future topics that you'd like to hear about. New episodes drop every other week. And until next time, thank you for listening to the USA Volleyball Show, the official podcast of USA Volleyball.
This has been the USA Volleyball Show with Clarence Hughes and Stephen Munson. Produced by Curtis Ward. Our content producer is Laura Fawcett. Our marketing lead is Bree Jaycox. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to rate and review. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the USA Volleyball Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.